In the valley of the Great Rift, where the soil is as red as a ripened plum, and the sun sits like a heavy gold coin in the sky, lay the village of Eloen. But do not be mistaken, this was no village of thatched huts and dusty paths. Eloen was a kingdom of the new gold. It was a place of high-walled estates, electric gates that hummed like restless bees, and SUVs that roared through paved streets, kicking up the scent of expensive gasoline and jasmine. At the heart of Eloen stood the tallest gates of all, belonging to James and Malaika. James was the village's favorite son. He was a man of broad shoulders and a smile that seemed to promise prosperity to anyone who caught its light. He had built the village clinic. He had paved the road to the market. When he walked into the Eloen Country Club, the air seemed to thicken with respect. Beside him always walked Malaika. Malaika was a woman whose name meant angel, and she lived up to it with every breath. Her skin was the color of deep mahogany, polished by the finest creams, and her eyes held a kindness that felt like a cool breeze on a humid afternoon. They had 3 children: Kofi, who was 12 and had his father's height; Amara, 9 with her mother's grace; and little Leo, who was only 5 and still smelled of milk and innocence. To the people of Eloen, the family was a living portrait of the African dream. But portraits are flat, 2-dimensional things. They have no back and they have no depth. The abuse did not begin with a fist, it began with a correction. In the early years, in their gleaming kitchen of granite and chrome, James would comment on the salt in the stew. "A woman of your status, Malaika, should know that a man of my standing deserves perfection." Then came the isolation. "Why do you wish to visit your mother in the old village? She only wants your money. Stay here. Look at this house. Is it not enough for you?" Malaika stayed. She looked at the marble floors that cost more than her mother's entire life's work. She looked at the 3 beautiful faces of her children. She told herself that James was under pressure. He was a great man, and great men had great tempers. The first time he struck her, it was because she had laughed too loudly at a gala, drawing the eyes of other men. In the car ride home, the silence was a physical weight. When they entered their bedroom, a room designed by an architect from Milan, he turned and backhanded her so hard the world went grey. "You are my wife," he whispered, his voice as smooth as velvet over a blade. "I will not have you performing like a common girl for the village." Malaika fell against the cedar wardrobe. She waited for the apology. In the movies and the gossip she had had, there was always an apology: flowers, jewelry, tears. James did not apologize. He simply undid his tie, laid it perfectly on the rack, and went to sleep. As the years passed, the corrections became more frequent and more violent. Malaika learned the geometry of her own house based on where it was safest to fall. She learned that the thick rugs in the library muffled the sound of a body hitting the floor, and that the heavy drapes in the lounge hid the shadows of a struggle from the neighbors. She tried to leave once, when Kofi was 7. She had packed a small bag and made it as far as the gate, but the security guard, a man whose children's school fees were paid by James's foundation, had looked at her with pity and blocked the way. "Madame," he said, "where will you go? The master is a good man. He is just stressed. If you leave, he will lose his mind, and you will lose everything. Think of the children." That was the refrain that became her shackles. Think of the children. She went to the village pastor, a man who lived in a house donated by James. He had listened to her, seen the faint yellowing bruise on her temple, and sighed. "Malaika, marriage is a cross. James is a pillar of our community. If you shame him, you shame the church. Pray harder, be more submissive. A soft word turns away wrath. She went to her own sisters in the city. They looked at her designer handbag and the diamond studs in her ears. Malaika, be sensible. Do you want to come back to the dust? Do you want your children to attend the public schools where the roofs leak? James provides. All men have a little fire in them. Malaika realized then that she was not just James's wife, she was his trophy, his social currency, and the benefactor of everyone she knew. To help her was to bite the hand that fed the village. By the time Leo was 5, the mask was slipping. James was no longer careful where he hit her. He began to do it in front of the children. Kofi, the eldest, had started to grow a shell of silence. He would see his father drag his mother by her hair across the kitchen tiles, and he would simply turn his siblings to the upstairs playroom and turn the music up loud. He was learning the most dangerous lesson of all, that this was the way of the world. One Tuesday, a heavy rainstorm rolled over Eloan. The sky turned the color of a bruised plum. James came home early, his face twisted in a way Malaika had learned to fear. A business deal had soured. "Why are the lights so bright?" he roared, stepping into the foyer. "I'm just dimming them, James," Malaika said softly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The children were doing homework. "You'll dim them?" he mocked. "You think you control the light in this house?" He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the entryway table, a gift from the Prime Minister, and hurled it. It shattered against the wall, a spray of glass cutting Malaika's cheek. Something snapped in Malaika that night. Perhaps it was the sight of Leo peeking through the banisters upstairs, his eyes wide with a terror that no 5-year-old should know. "I am leaving, James," she said. Her voice was thin, but it was steady. "I am taking the children and we are going. I don't care about the house. I don't care about the money. I would rather sleep on the red dirt of the old village than spend another night in this tomb." James stilled. The silence that followed was louder than the thunder outside. He didn't scream, he didn't roar, he smiled. It was a slow, terrifying peeling back of his lips. "You think you can leave me?" he whispered. "I built you, Malaika. Without me you are a ghost, and I would rather have a dead ghost than a living one that belongs to someone else." Malaika turned to run towards the stairs, towards her children. She didn't make it to the first step. James was faster, fueled by a lifetime of entitlement and the rage of a man who realized his prize was escaping. He caught her at the base of the marble staircase. The struggle was short. There were no neighbors to hear, for the walls of the mansion were thick and the rain was heavy. The children, huddled in the playroom, heard a thud, a sound like a heavy sack of grain being dropped. Then they heard nothing but the rain. James stood over her. Malaika's eyes were open, staring at the grand chandelier above, the crystals swaying slightly in the draught. The angel of Eloan was gone. He didn't panic. He was a man of logic, a man of wealth. He called his lawyer. He called the chief of police, who owed him his position. By morning, the story in Eloan was that Malaika had slipped on the rain-slicked marble, a tragic accident. The village mourned. They threw a funeral that was the grandest Eloan had ever seen. The coffin was gold-plated. The flowers were flown in from Kenya. James stood at the gravesite, a black veil of grief draped over his shoulders, holding the hands of his 3 motherless children. The villagers whispered about what a strong man he was. They talked about how he would struggle to raise them alone. But the spirits of the ancestors do not care for marble or gold. A month after the funeral, Kofi, the eldest, walked into the police station in the neighboring province, far enough that his father's name held less weight. He didn't go alone. He went with his mother's hidden phone, which she had kept taped to the underside of the playroom table. On it was a recording. Malaika knew in those final weeks that the end was coming. She had set the phone to record the moment James entered the final night. The village of Eloen woke up the next day to see the great man led away in handcuffs. The walls of the mansion couldn't protect him from the voice of the woman he had silenced. But the lesson, my children, is a bitter one. Eloen still stands. The mansion is now empty, haunted by the memory of a woman who stayed for the sake of the gold and the future. The children are scattered among relatives, their hearts forever scarred by the sight of their father's hands. Malaika's mother back in the old village sits in the dust and weeps. She would give 1,000 Eloens, 1,000 marble floors, and every SUV in the rift just to have her daughter back in a hut with a leaking roof, alive and breathing.
Moral of the story. Hear me well. A golden cage is still a cage. Violence does not care for your bank account. It does not care for your status. It does not care if you are the angel of the village. If a hand is raised in discipline today, it will be raised in destruction tomorrow. Do not stay for the children. They are learning how to be victims or monsters by watching you. Do not stay for the wealth. Gold cannot buy back a life once it is spent. When the first shadow falls on the marriage, walk into the light, for it is better to be a living beggar in the dust than a dead queen in a marble tomb.